Today we're going to talk about how to bake level cakes. When building a cake, stacking a cake, if you have good level layers, it makes it a million times easier. The best way to make that happen is to not overmix your batter. That's probably the most common mistake that bakers make. So to start out, you want to preheat your oven. This recipe, it says to preheat at 325, and you want to make sure you preheat it in plenty of time to make sure that the air in the oven is well regulated and that you don't have weird hot spots in your oven. And then once you get your oven going, you're going to want to prep your pans so they're ready to go when your batter's ready. So to do that, you can use whatever you want, whether it's wiping it with shortening or butter or whatever. I just spray because it's easiest. But you're going to want to spray the bottom and spray the sides of your pan. Then you're going to want to have parchment paper. I just have regular parchment paper, and then I just trace the bottom of my pans and then cut them out a little bit smaller than my tracing so they fit in the bottom of my pan. And you're going to want to put some parchment paper down at the bottom. You don't have to, but it makes getting your cakes out of your pans a million times easier. And then just spray the top of your parchment paper so it comes off the cake really well. I already prepped the other two, so all three of my pans are ready to go. Now this cake, because we're using a cake mix, it can either make 3 6-inch cakes or 2 8-inch cakes, or you could just throw it in a 9x13 if you want. I'm gonna do 6-inch cakes this time just because it'll make it so that when I stack the cake, you have more to see. Because if I only had the 2 8-inches, I'd only be stacking one on top of the other. So once you've got your cake pans prepared, we're gonna start making our batter. You also wanna make sure that all of your cold ingredients have come to room temperature. It's not necessary, but it makes it so that it blends together a lot easier, which means you're mixing it less, which makes it a lot less likely that you're gonna overmix your batter. So you need egg whites. I think it was 4 egg whites, I don't remember, but you'll have to look at the list. But your egg whites, a trick for eggs to get them to room temperature if you forget to set them out is you can just get a bowl of warm, I usually use hot, not boiling hot water, but just hot water from the faucet. And then you can stick the eggs in the water and let them sit for like 5 to 10 minutes, and then that usually brings them down to room temperature or pretty close. So you can do that if you forget to do the eggs. And then we've got our sour cream. We're gonna add into here. And then we've got our buttermilk. All of these have been set out for about an hour to kind of get them down to room temperature or as close as I can get them. And then we need a 1/3 cup of oil. Hopefully I can see the wine. She said vegetable oil, I think. I just have canola oil, so that's what I used. And then we need to mix in our extracts. On her page, she says to use clear extract, which is what I'm going to use. Not necessary at all. It's just because it's a white cake. And so if you use clear extract, it's less likely to make your cake more of like a ivory color. And honestly, that's why there's egg whites too. If you get some yolk in there, it's not gonna be a big deal. It's still gonna bake just fine. It just makes your batter whiter. And then we need 1 teaspoon of almond extract. So there's your extracts. So mix it all together. Right now, over whisking is not a problem. And over mixing. It's once we get the dry ingredients that you're gonna have that issue because it starts to build up the gluten, which then will make your cake deflate. Okay, so once it's all whisked together, just whisk it until it's mixed together really nice. Then you're gonna sift in your cake mix. And just like room temperature, it's not necessary, but it does make it easier to mix, because then you don't have to mix as much because you don't have those weird lumps. So we'll put this like that. This is why I used to sift it. You can use whatever you have at your house. And I'm gonna probably 2 times speed this because cake mix is very lumpy. The reason why I use a whisk instead of a spoon when mixing this in the sieve in here is because it also breaks up the clumps, so it goes through it a lot faster, just because it takes a long time to get it through there. So then once you have sifted your cake mix, you want to, I'm gonna use an actual spatula. You want to mix your wet and your dry ingredients together. And like I said before, you don't want to overmix. So you basically just want to mix it until the streaks of cake mix are gone. And I would say stop before you think you're supposed to, most likely. Because I think people overmix without thinking that they are. Okay, so as you can see here, oh, I wish I could show you better. So like, there's, the cake mix is mixed in, but it's not super smooth. I mean, it's smooth because we sifted it, but it's not incredibly smooth. Okay, so I'm gonna get my pans. And then some of you requested just to do a white cake mix. If you wanted to do a white cake mix, now you would just evenly distribute it through your pans and bake it. But just for the sake of having some more instruction with decoration and stuff, I decided to do the cookie one. So if you want to do the cookie one and you want to have the different colors in the batter, you're going to split the batter in half as best you can into a different bowl. I don't know, that's probably about half. And then you're going to want to mix in some pink food coloring. I like to use gel food coloring because you don't have to use as much and it gives you a better pigment, but you can use liquid too. And then just like before, you don't want to overmix, so just mix it as much as needed and then stop. And with this cake mix, you're mixing it with the white anyway, and so it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Once you get that done, to do the 2 different colors of the batter, you want to evenly mix the 2 into there by doing scoops. So I'm gonna do like a scoop of the white, and then a scoop of the pink, and usually when I do batter into the pans, like if you were doing just a white cake mix without the pink, I like to use a, what's it called? A kitchen scale to weigh the pans to make sure they're getting an equal amount of batter. This one, because I'm scooping it in with a scoop, I'm kind of keeping track of how much is in there anyway, so I'm not gonna worry about weighing them this time. Okay, once you have done that, I just kind of shake it a little bit to get the batter to be a little flatter and more evenly in the pan. And then this is something that I like to do with my pans to help make them more level. I know some bakers like to do this and some don't. I have had good results with it, so that's why I use them. It's not necessary at all, but I like to use what they call baking strips, and you put them around the pans. Basically, it's fabric. Here, I'll show you. So I just put them in a bowl. but I've had these soaking while I was making the cake. So they're just strips of fabric, and you squeeze out the water so that they're not dripping wet, but you still want them to have water in them. And what it does is it helps keep the pan cool while it's baking, so that the edges of the cake doesn't bake too fast. Does that make sense? Because usually when you bake your cake, the edges of cake are usually more brown, right, than the inside, because they cook faster. So these kind of help slow that down, so then your cake is a more consistent color. Like I said, completely not necessary. I just like it because I feel like it adds to a more consistent cake. And I just like the look of it when you cut into it, that it doesn't have the brown edges. So you can also make these with tinfoil and paper towels. Once I get these in the oven, I'll show you how to do that if you're interested in doing that. So now once these are baked, or once these are ready to go, they're ready to bake. So when you put them in the oven, you want to try to evenly distribute them through the oven on the same rack if possible. And you don't want them touching, so that the air can move around the pans as well. And you don't want them touching the sides of the oven either, if that makes sense. So let me put them in and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay. As you can see, they're in the oven, not touching. They're not touching the sides of the oven, and they're all in the same rack. So that makes it so that I'm gonna close that so that I don't lose all my hot air. But it makes it so that they cook a little more evenly. Now I'll show you how to make the baking strips. So you'll need tin foil and a paper towel long enough to go around the edges of your pan. So first, you take your tin foil and you want it to be long enough to go around the edge of the pan with like maybe 3 or 4 inches extra to help keep it together. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. And then you're gonna want a paper towel, and you're gonna fold your paper towel into forks. Okay? And then when you're ready to bake, you'll take your paper towel and you'll get it wet. And once you get it wet, unwad it, and you'll put it in the middle of your tin foil. Wrap it up quickly. So you're gonna fold your tin foil over that. Okay, so then you have this strip with wet paper towel in it. Then you get a pan. So you got your pan, you get your strip, and if you have a shorter pan, you can make your strip shorter. Measure it, do it to match the height of your pan. So then you wrap it around your pan, and then you're gonna kind of wrap your edges so they stick together. And then you can just kind of mold it to your pan. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be able to stay on while it's in the oven, okay? So that's how you can do it homemade style, if you'd like. And these, I reused mine like, I don't know, 3 to 5 times before I threw them away. I just made sure that the paper towel was dry before I stored it, which usually dries out in the oven anyway. And then you just unfold it, get the paper towel wet, put it back in, and you can just reuse it a few times before your paper towel kind of starts disintegrating. But it works great, and that's how I do mine, but it's up to you. So I'm gonna let this bake. I forgot to set my timer. So I'm gonna set a timer. Another thing is you don't wanna open your oven before your cake is like 80% baked, which I know you're probably like, how do I know it's 80% baked? Basically wait until most of the time frame is up. So for example, if your cake is supposed to bake for about 25 minutes, I will usually set my timer for about 20 minutes. And then once the 20 minutes is up, I'll turn on my oven light and check it out without opening the oven. If it looks like it's starting to be mostly set, then I will open up my oven and do further check. If it still looks pretty battery and doughy, then I'll just turn off the light, set the timer for a little bit longer, and then check it later. Once it gets to where it looks like it's pretty set, Then I will open my oven and do the second check. And the second check is you want to be able to touch it lightly with your finger on the top and have it come back up, the cake. If you push it with your finger and it just kind of sinks, then you know it's not ready. Another note to pay attention to is once your cake is about to be done, it pulls away from the pan. It doesn't cling to the pan anymore, which is another reason why it's important to spray or grease the pan really well, because it makes it easier to know when the cake is done. Once those two things happen, then you know your cake is ready to go. You can try it with a toothpick. I haven't done that for a really long time. That's how I used to check them. But I've learned that if you use this method, it's a lot more accurate, and my cakes turn out a lot less dry and overbaked if I do this method. So do what works for you, but I've learned that that works better for me, to just check the size of the cake and check the top of the cake, and as long as those two pass my test, then I can pull them out. And it's gonna be trial and error. You're gonna have to bake a few cakes. Some cakes will turn out more dry than others, more overbaked than others, until you kind of learn your oven and you kind of figure it out with your cakes. So be patient with yourself and you'll figure it out. I used to make a cake a week for a couple months until I felt more comfortable with it. And I feel like because I did that and because I was patient with that, I've had a lot of success with my cakes being flat, and which has kept me from having to level them when they're done. But don't you worry, I will teach you how to level your cakes. So if they do turn out domed, or even if they sink a little bit, we can fix it so they're easier to stack. So I'm gonna let this cake bake for a little bit and I'll be right back.